Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben, this is Books with Genghis Khan, and today I have for you my October reading wrap-up. So it was a very interesting month in my reading life because it started with a big chunker that took me over 2 weeks to read, and that was A Dance with Dragons by George R. R. Martin, Book 5 in A Song of Ice and Fire. I ended up liking this one the least out of all the Martin books I've read so far, but it was still very solid, and from the beginning of really the second half onward to the end, I was just as gripped as I had been usually throughout all of the books. But the first half was a bit of a struggle to just keep me fully engaged, and Martin setting up so many slow burn, intricate plot lines that feel like takes a long time to make any progress with. But this has aged really well for me already because there are so many things going on, and as a first time reader of it, a lot of little tiny details I think I missed. And so watching these spoiler deep dives on BookTube has been a real treat. So going onto Alex Nieves' channel and watching his chat with Jimmy Nuts, and then going onto Joanna's channel to watch that spoiler talk with read by Kyle, who's just read this a million times. And so I was loving just hearing all these little bits of lore and more hidden details that I maybe missed, but also just hearing the discussion around it got me so interested in exploring a lot of the plot lines that while I was reading it was a little bit more bored by. So I think this is one that I even now just appreciate much more than when I was first reading it, and I wouldn't want Martin to go back and really change anything or do anything differently. He has decided to just really take his time and not rush this story with making sure that he provides on the page all of this important detail and these character journeys and arcs, and so that we don't just gloss over them and hear about them in retrospect, but it's all here on the page. And I think in terms of the payoff for the reader on the whole, it's better off having these big chunkers that maybe are a little unwieldy with some uneven pacing or long stretches where not too much is happening. Because the payoffs in the end are there, even if we don't get any more books. But I've already read the preview chapters, so right after I finish this, I read all of the released chapters of Winds of Winter, and oh man, so much is set up that I just can't wait to get to, so Winds cannot come soon enough. After Dance, with that slow burn epic fantasy that took me a long time to get through, I really was needing a change of pace, and luckily, one of my favorite authors just came in with a new release, and that is Bernard Cornwell's Sharpe's Command. So Bernard Cornwell is 79 years old at this point and still publishing, releasing books in the Sharpe series. This is the 23rd novel he's released, but I think it slots in around number 14 chronologically. And it was just a real treat to kind of go back in time to Sharpe in Spain when Wellington is first starting to plan the invasion of Spain that would go on to be very successful and lead to the invasion of France. And this is a very breezy, fun, Sharpe read. It's one of the shorter ones at 300 pages. It's about this reconnaissance mission that Sharpe's going on, and then the kind of British invasion of a couple French forts on a river that are in a very strategic place. So it's a very important mission for this overall peninsular campaign. But Cornwell at this point just is having a blast writing. This is just so filled with wit and clever humor and some comic relief. There's this young lieutenant officer who's an artillery officer who's traveling with Sharpe here, who's very green and he's kind of bumbling. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but he's still very intelligent about his role in artillery. But he's kind of a fish out of water with Sharpe and his group of rifles. And that was just a continual fun comic relief. And he's a very earnest, good-hearted character as well. And then we have a classic kind of Sharpe villain as well that just provides some a nice dramatic foil that is kind of mustache twirly, but that's to be expected with these. And just Cornwell leans into that and becomes a kind of very enjoyable cat and mouse game, as many Sharpe books do, between Sharpe and whoever's trying to get in his way. So that was fun, and I had a blast with it, listened to it, and did it immersively with the Rupert Farley audiobook, which is just tremendous. So yeah, perfect change of pace to go from that epic fantasy to this more breezy, action-filled historical fiction. Then I've been trying to be better about actually just picking up the new releases that I get, so they don't just sit on my shelf and languish, and then I feel bad about having spent the money on the new hardcovers. So I just picked up another new release, which is James J's James J. Butcher's Long Past Dues. This is book 2 in his Unorthodox Chronicles, a sequel to Dead Man's Hand from last year. So James J. Butcher is a pretty young author, the son of Jim Butcher, and this is one of the only other urban fantasy series I've tried out other than the Dresden Files, which I love so much. And the first book to me, I liked. I didn't love it, and I was interested to see if there was going to be a major evolution in the storytelling because of where things got left at the end of book 1. There was going to be a completely new life situation for the main character, Grimsby. But this book ended up feeling very similar to book 1. So I enjoyed it, but it didn't leave much of an impact on me. I wasn't getting too emotionally invested. It felt somewhat predictable for an action-heavy kind of book. I think the action scenes are a little lackluster. The world building yet really hasn't come into focus. It seems very kind of scattershot, and I'm hoping that that's something that we just, as the Dresden Files did, just really gets a lot deeper and opens up and becomes more clear how everything's working. But this one, again, I am attached to a lot of the characters, especially the main POV. It's multi-POV, but Grimsby gets like 90% of those. And the overall tone of these is not as dark and heavy as Dresden Files. It is a lighter tone. It has more of just a youthful overall feeling to it than the Dresden Files. So it's definitely feels more like PG-13 rating kind of thing. There's a lot of the issues some people might have with the Dresden Files I think you won't have here. But again, the trade-off with that is that this just feels lower stakes and there's less for me to really get invested in. And there's so few different characters and plot details here where it feels like every little detail that's on the page, and it all takes place over just a couple days, and every character we meet feels like they're essential to this plot of this book. And so for something that has kind of a mystery element to it, it seemed like a lot of things were really clearly telegraphed, and so it felt a little predictable, not overly surprising, but overall still satisfying and fun. But I am thinking that this series is not going to become any kind of favorite. Just a fun, quick diversion every year or so, or however often he's going to be releasing books. But I don't know that I'd just recommend this to Dresden Files fans, since it has a very different feel, and I think scratches some different itches. There was a prose thing in here that did bother me a lot, which is that Butcher is fairly obsessed with similes, with just getting creative, weird similes onto the page. I kid you not, I think there's at least an average of one simile for every single page of this book. Sometimes you get a bunch of similes on the same page. Maybe other times you get a little break of a page or two. But honestly, there's about an average of one simile per page. And some people might love this. For me, I would prefer to not really have that many similes because they feel like an author insert and not a believable thought that the third-person limited perspective character would actually be having in those moments. So they would usually take me out of the story. And also, they would make me pause and think about the comparison. Be like, oh, okay, I can see that comparison. That's pretty interesting. But it kind of interrupted my flow just continually. And so just to give you an example of a simile or two. Oh, here's a fun one. He sat slumped in the Jeep's passenger seat, his exhausted body sinking into the cracked leather like an anvil in damp sand. So I would have just preferred him to say he sunk into the cracked leather and just moved on. I'm visualizing the scene and I'm staying immersed. But then all of a sudden I'm pausing to think, oh, an anvil in damp sand. So this is like a Looney Tunes image. Like I have to create this image and think about what that would be like and think about like how the comparison works. And for a lot of people, you might really enjoy that. But that's something that I've never really enjoyed. I don't really typically enjoy reading poetry. I'm not too interested in descriptive literary devices like that that are like more abstract or that are about imagery that really make you think about them. It's just not where my interest lies when I read. And so that is a prose kind of tick that James J. Butcher is just continually employing, and I think will work really well for a lot of people, because I do think a lot of the similes are creative and clever, but not something that I really love. And so that maybe is getting in the way of just complete immersion and enjoyment in these books so far. But I will say I do like these enough to keep going. Then I took a little trip back to the Six Duchies, to the novella that Hobb wrote in the series which is the Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince. So I had an idea because of all the mentionings of this legend, this in-world legend in the Tawny Man trilogy, about what it would kind of cover or the point of it. But I was not prepared to really get swept up and so invested in this story and the characters. It's less than 200 pages long, but the character telling it was interesting, and I got really attached to that character and all the characters. This narrator, the person who's writing this story down in the world, had a front row seat to witness all of these events around Buckheap that are key for understanding a bit of history in the Farseer line, and also how the wit magic became such a taboo in Six Duchy society and such a bad thing to scorn. And so this is a pretty essential tale, I think, for big fans of the series. And I think Hobb approached this truly just like a Greek tragedy or a Shakespearean tragedy. The title might give off vibes of like a cozy fairy tale, but this is not that. So Hobb is leaning in to tragedy here, and I was just entranced by this quick-paced story because Hobb usually tells really slow burn stories over many hundreds and thousands of pages. But this one, we pack in a lot of narrative events and time and character arcs over the course of just a few pages here and there. Just so much is happening. And yeah, it was a lot to take in and process. I'm glad I read it. Another just spectacular story from Hobb. That was easy 5-star read. I could barely put it down. I read it just over 2 days, but would have read it in one sitting if I had the time. So yeah, that was great. And then takes me to the book that I did not expect to finish at the end of the month, but I just devoured it over a couple days, and that is The Sunlit Man, the most recent Brandon Sanderson release, the last of the secret projects, and the actual physical book is just stunning. The red and gold and black coloring on the cover, just amazing. The art inside, great. Oh, love the black sprayed edges for this, especially with the theme of the book and the world building. It all works, and did it immersively mostly with a new audio narrator. William Demerit is just this new narrator that Sanderson tried out for this and did an awesome job. And so I did enjoy the audio and reading from this beautiful Dragonsteel edition. And the story, I knew from the preview chapters, was going to be right up my alley. It starts off with a bang with some action scenes, and a character that you're getting the sense of is someone you've probably seen before from the Stormlight archive, but then you're not sure who it is, and then it gets revealed. And that's really cool that it's a side character that you know a little bit of from that previous series, but now there's been a long time jump, and so he's dealing with a lot of fallout from events that we haven't seen on the page, and that was keeping me at a distance for a while from really getting too invested in this main character's story, because he's telling us kind of his emotions that he's trying to process and hinting at things that have happened between the last time we saw him and now. And unlike a lot of the other really impactful character arcs in the Cosmere books, we haven't seen all of that backstory, all those events on the page. So I was kind of missing out on that. But then some of the climactic events started to occur towards like the middle and the 3/4 mark and towards the end, and they really hit me hard. Just Sanderson plotted this one so tightly, and there were some really awesome Sanderson moments in here that are just some of my favorites, and that did hit me a little bit emotionally. And so I was impressed by what he was able to do by just setting this character arc up for just a few hundred pages. The world building here was just so cool. I love the action scenes. The main character is handicapped in fighting because he cannot, there's a kind of this magical block on him actually doing anything offensive or where he's attacking someone. So he can only be defensive or dodge or run. And the way that affects the fight scenes was so interesting. So that was really cool. The world building here, I don't want to say too much about, but the plotting, the world building here on this planet, and the characters' arc and journey, it all kind of resonated with each other, and there was this real coherence to all of that that was really special. And there's a lot of payoff for that towards the end of this book. No complaints about this one. This was a banger. Just as Sanderson's getting into the space age Cosmere, and as books are becoming more Cosmere-y, I find myself enjoying them even more. And so I love this new direction that things are going, but I understand that people that aren't mega fans, they might be feeling more distanced as the writing is taking this turn, and that's understandable too. But for me, this kind of book was just a delight from start to finish. So I had a great time with it, and it's an easy choice for my book of the month. So yeah, Sunlit Man wins. Got it right in, finished it on Halloween, last day of the month, and definitely a high-tier Cosmere book for me. Not probably one of my favorites, but did love it all the same. And what I'm reading now, I have begun the Rainwild Chronicles. This is Dragon Keeper. I'm just a couple chapters in, but the beginning was amazing so far. I'm so into what's going on at the start of this series, picking up from the events that I knew kind of were going to be happening from what I knew from the end of Live Ship, and just hearing things going on in the Rainwild during the Tawny Man trilogy. So loving this so far. Some interesting new POV characters that I'm totally on board for. So yeah, the next stage of my Robin Hobb, Realm of the Elderlings journey is upon me, and I am pumped. So I don't know what else I might read this month, but that's going to take a little while to get through. And tell me what you've been loving reading over the past month, or things that haven't worked. Just love to chat about anything and everything about our books that we've been reading. So I'll catch you later.